In Peterborough, there's been a triple Torquay Castle Circus. There was a there. That was a woman being jailed.
But over half of the prison population in this country, many of whom will be released early, are therefore violent crimes. None of those people politically can be allowed out extra early because...
Do you think foreign nationals convicted of assaulting children should be deported? Keir Starmer doesn't.
This is shaping up to be the most unpopular government ever, and potentially the last Labour government in history.
Are you safe in this country anymore? How does a nation come to terms with a government that releases cold-blooded murderers onto its streets? In one of the most alarming displays of negligence, Keir Starmer has managed to do just that, letting those responsible for the murder of a disabled man walk free. But it doesn't stop there. This case isn't an isolated incident, it's part of a larger pattern that reveals Starmer's soft-on-crime policies, his baffling incompetence, and a complete disregard for public safety. Is this really the leadership Britain needs? Or is it time to rethink who we're entrusting with our nation's safety? Individuals who carelessly ended the life of one of society's most vulnerable have been set free. And the public is rightly furious. The release of these murderers is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Starmer's chronic failure to keep the streets safe. You won't believe the horrific details of the case, so I'll just show you.
A disabled dad of one was stabbed to death yesterday with a machete just after 3:30 p.m. Wheelchair user Jade Barnett, 38, was apparently stuck in his mobility scooter here in Clacton, East London. Jade's mum, Joyce Barnett, has told the press he was loved by everyone around here. She said, "How could anyone attack him in a wheelchair? I don't know. We just want answers." The police has since arrested two men aged 21 and 28 on suspicion of murder.
Utterly shameful for this government to deny justice to its citizens. How disgusting is it that the murder suspects are released without any proper, transparent investigation? This troubling trend of knife crime has been through the roof lately, thanks to Starmer and his love for criminals. Imagine the agony the families of the victims must be going through, knowing that the criminals are back on the street, hunting for more innocents. What's worse is the deranged, lunatic thought process it would take to justify that behavior. This isn't anything new though. Starmer has always been soft on crime. Before we take a look at his horrible policies, let's see his hypocrisy.
I won't stand for record levels of knife crime that we have in this country today, and I won't stand for 9 out of 10 crimes going unsolved.
This case of releasing murderers is shocking, but it is sadly not surprising. Under Starmer's watch, the UK's justice system has taken a nosedive. He talks a big game about not standing for crime and parades as a champion of justice. However, his definition of justice must be vastly different from the rest of us sane folk. His consistent approach to justice, be soft, lenient, and hope no one notices. Well, the British public is noticing and they're outraged. There's a reason why they call him Sir Softy, and it's not because he is wholesome. Here's the actual reason, straight from the source.
2010 crime down by 50% under the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. 20,000 more police officers, we've given them more powers, and we've toughened up sentencing, all opposed by Sir Softy over there. He attended 21 sentencing council meetings that watered down punishments. That's why they call him Sir Softy. Soft on crime, soft on criminals.
Rishi Sunak's recent dubbing of Starmer as Sir Softy couldn't be more accurate. Starmer's soft-on-crime approach is not just a catchy tagline, it's a reality that is playing out on the streets of the UK. His record shows a worrying trend: shorter sentences, early releases, and less accountability for those who commit heinous crimes.
And on the front page of the Daily Mail today, Calvin, the paper revealed that Starmer opposed the deportation of a despicable child rapist, Fabian Henry, who was jailed for 2 vile attacks on a girl of 17 and for abducting and having sex with a 15-year-old. But when the Home Office tried to put him on a flight back to Jamaica along with 41 other criminals, the Labour leader endorsed a letter criticising the move.
We only need to look at his past to see the reality. Really, how insane is it that he didn't want to deport such a criminal? It is perhaps the most heinous crime out of them all, and Starmer had no issue with it. So, of course, he brings the same energy to the Prime Minister's office.
There's a shocking other case tonight involving another rapist who got 6 years. They wanted to put him on the plane, and Starmer and co, and it's always the left.
Yeah.
So if you actually do believe that these people should be back in Jamaica, by the way, you can't possibly vote Labour, because the leader and a whole series of other people, including the Shadow Foreign Secretary, always write petitions saying stop these flights. So the bottom line is, if anybody is soft on crime, it is seriously Starmer and co.
Starmer and his cronies are notorious for their love for criminals and hatred for Britain. Remember when prison sentences actually meant something? When a life sentence was, well, a life sentence. Under Starmer's leadership, those days are long gone. Convicts who should be serving the full length of their sentences are getting out early, roaming the streets, and putting the public at risk. The disabled man's case is a chilling example of what happens when you let criminals off the hook too easily. But you may ask, why is this happening? Are prisoners really being released early?
We could see looters running amok, smashing in windows, robbing shops and setting neighbourhoods alight. In short, if we fail to act now, we face the collapse of the criminal justice system. So today I am announcing the government has no option but to introduce a temporary change in the law. Those serving eligible standard determinate sentences will leave prison after serving 40% rather than 50% in custody.
Here's the announcement of doom straight from our current Secretary of Justice. The early release of the murderers responsible for the death of a disabled man is of course a tragedy. But it's not just a random mistake, it's symptomatic of Starmer's larger inability to lead effectively. As the head of Labour, Starmer has consistently pushed for policies that prioritise leniency over justice. The result? Criminals are being let out early, and law-abiding citizens are paying the price. Of course, this is just the beginning of a complete meltdown of consequences. Even Starmer himself admits this.
Not having enough prison places is about as fundamental a failure as you can get. And those people throwing rocks, torching cars, making threats, they didn't just know the system was broken. They were betting on it, gaming it. They thought, they'll never arrest me. And if they do, I won't be prosecuted. And if I am, I won't get much of a sentence.
That's your Prime Minister admitting that his policies are being used by criminals to game the system. Welcome to Labour's Britain. And let's be clear, this isn't about rehabilitation or giving second chances. These are murderers. The crime they committed was premeditated, violent, and targeted the most vulnerable in society. Yet Starmer's government still believes these individuals deserve a pass. What kind of message does this send to the public? That the disabled and vulnerable are expendable? That murder is somehow forgivable if you've served 40% of your sentence? In this case, these suspects weren't even tried, and that's because of another Labour policy called Early Dawn.
And as you outlined, it's important to distinguish the difference between two different kind of initiatives. One was the early release scheme, and this is different. I'm seeing a lot of confusion on social media where people think this is an early release scheme. It's not. It's separate to the early release scheme. So it's this Operation Early Dawn, which is essentially making sure that if people are going to be sent to court, there is a prison place waiting for them. If there is no prison place waiting for them, they won't be sent to court until then. They will either be held in police cells or they will be released on bail and then come back to court.
Is that supposed to be reassuring? Yes, we're releasing criminals early, but don't worry, we're also delaying prosecution. They somehow managed to make a bad situation even worse. I think that deserves an award in all the wrong ways. It's interesting that they call it Early Dawn, which is an early dawn of Britain's doom. What's sad is that they always blame the previous government without taking action to fix things. It's their favourite excuse. The problem is that their policies are worsening the matter. Don't believe me? Here's an expert analysis.
Fine. But over half of the prison population in this country, many of whom will be released early, are therefore violent crimes. None of those people politically can be allowed out extra early, because what is going to happen, and it will happen, is that people will reoffend violently. And it will be bad because we already have a dearth of police officers to actually respond, or court spaces to try these people.
They will reoffend. The only question is how soon. One of Starmer's favourite solutions to the problem of overcrowded prisons is early release. But here's the thing, letting criminals out early doesn't solve the problem, it just moves it from inside the prisons to outside on the streets. The British public is essentially footing the bill for Starmer's soft-on-crime experiment, and it's not going well. To nobody's surprise, the criminals did reoffend. We already have numbers on that. Here are the stats of the offenders.
It's 2,000 prisoners on a single day because we've got no space in prison. Certainly, I read an article on His Majesty's BBC earlier saying that in one particular area, I think it was Nottinghamshire, where they've had all these early releases, a quarter have just gone back and committed crimes again.
Oh, what a surprise. Who could possibly have guessed that that would happen?
It's not just murderers who are being released early either. Under Starmer's government, there's a disturbing trend of convicted criminals of all stripes being set free long before they've served anything resembling a fair punishment. You've got burglars, drug dealers, and even violent offenders being released back into the public, often only to re-offend. That's a clown show of injustice if I've ever seen one. Guess why they're doing this?
And run with it, because now it's very pressing for the Labour government to clear out lots of prison spaces so that hundreds upon hundreds of rioters can go into prison. But of course, this is the folly of so many short sentences. Short sentences, we know, manifestly do not work. And so many people released under this early release scheme are homeless. They've got other problems in their lives.
They are freeing up spaces to punish the rioters. You know, the people protesting against Starmer's incompetent government. Needless to say, those who were violent should be put into prison. But that doesn't mean you release other criminals. Starmer doesn't seem to believe in the idea of justice being served. Never mind the fact that this puts ordinary, law-abiding citizens at risk. It's all about looking good on paper, even if the reality is far more dangerous. Is it any wonder that Starmer's approval ratings are at rock bottom?
Welcome along. Sir Keir Starmer is tanking, and so is the Labour Party. The nation has buyer's remorse. The latest polls show that Labour are down to 30%. The Tories, who don't even have a leader or any policies at the moment, are on 26%, and Reform are now at 19%, their joint highest rating ever. That means that in the last few weeks, Labour has already lost the equivalent of 65 seats in Parliament. Keir Starmer's personal approval ratings are in free fall. 44% of people are dissatisfied with him. That's his worst ever rating.
And it's not just Conservative critics who are up in arms about Starmer's approach to crime. Across the political spectrum, ordinary Brits are feeling less safe in their own communities, and they're sick of it. A recent poll showed that public trust in Starmer's ability to manage law and order is at an all-time low, and it's easy to see why.
Look, let's talk about something else, though. Let's also talk about what was announced this morning, and that is the government activating emergency measures to ease prison overcrowding. Basically, more rioters have been sentenced. I think we've got well into the hundreds. But this system, these nicknames, these title, these operations, Operation Early Dawn. I mean, it sounds like something to free us from Nazism, doesn't it? No, it's been activated this morning, and previously used by, of course, the Tory government back in May. And basically, it is basically to only summon defendants to a magistrate's court when space in prison is ready for them.
Yeah, just let everyone out. That's the recipe for anarchy. This latest case involving the release of the murderers is simply one more drop in a very full bucket of public discontent. People are scared. People are angry. And people are wondering why their Prime Minister is so out of touch with the very real dangers facing the country. One of which is the illegal immigration crisis, which obviously contributes to crime. Here's how Starmer has been royally messing that up too.
Street, junction with Lincoln Road. No, not yet. You've been searched, mate.
I mean, that to me is quite an extraordinary snapshot of modern-day Britain.
But it will be fascinating to see what actual consequences that individual faces. I mean, my jaw dropped when that machete came out. I know. The other thing my jaw dropped at was the spectacle of a policeman doing what we all want the police to do.
Right.
And that we've all seen these people, those of us that live in urban areas, have seen these people all over our cities, and it's so obvious what they're doing.
That's a whole machete caught on an illegal immigrant. That's downright insane that these weapons are even allowed here. And as she pointed out, will the person face any consequences at all for this? Starmer lets these people carry weapons. It's obvious what they'll do with it. Is this a surprise to anyone? Instead of focusing on these issues, Starmer and his government are busy investigating the so-called racist ticketing for the Oasis concert. Those are really good priorities. So Keir.
That this government doesn't need to be doing is fannying around, interfering in Oasis ticket concert prices. You know, there's no kind of human right to go to an Oasis concert.
No.
Either you got lucky and you got a ticket, or you can afford a ticket, or you can't, and you can listen to it on TV or, you know, on the radio or whatever. But we don't need some kind of government inquiry into Oasis ticketing. Give me strength.
No, I know.
We've got pensioners being murdered in allotments by children, and 12-year-olds who are being sentenced for peripheral parts in big political riots.
Utter madness, that's all it is. Britain is burning, and Starmer would rather pander to the woke hordes on Twitter. Let's focus on racist tickets and concerts instead of fixing the boatload of problems we're facing right now. Literally, boatloads of illegal immigrants are arriving here every day, and the government, instead of sending them away, they are accommodating them better than our own people, with our own money.
We know broadly that the government is spending literally millions and millions and millions of pounds, squillions of pounds, on providing, whether it's hotel accommodation or whether it's, I don't know, B&B, anywhere that they can find to accommodate the never-ending stream of migrants coming across the channel and claiming that they need to be fleeing war and persecution, so we need to look after them.
That's your money. It's not being spent on the economy, not healthcare, not education, but on the illegal immigrants who contribute significantly to the crime rates. So what does this all come down to? Simple incompetence. Keir Starmer has shown, time and time again, that he's not up to the task of running a country, particularly when it comes to matters of law and order. His soft on-crime policies, his failure to protect the vulnerable, and his prioritization of criminals over victims all point to one thing: a leader who's in way over his head.
This is in the last 24 hours. No, really? Last 24 hours, all of these headlines. Okay, so there's been a in a supermarket in Hackney. That's a fresh one, that happened today. A restaurant in Forest Gate. A man is critically ill in hospital after that. A really bad Gorton near Manchester, where a lovely woman was killed, and a Christian preacher husband and her daughter were both. Now, there's been in Truro, yeah, little old Truro. An acid attacker has struck in a place called TP Valley.
In such a short amount of time, that's a staggering list of attacks. Instead of taking decisive action to ensure public safety, Starmer is content with letting criminals off the hook and hoping for the best. But hope doesn't keep the streets safe. Strong policies do, tough penalties do, and a leader who understands the value of justice does.
What is going on in this country? I mean, once upon a time, those sorts of stories would pop up, you know, a month at a time, you know, every now and then. We'd learn about these things, and now they're absolutely everywhere, all the time. We've become totally desensitized to the fact that right now we're more like Mogadishu than the United Kingdom.
Britain is unrecognizable from what it used to be. What Britain needs is a government that takes crime seriously. We need longer sentences for violent offenders, not shorter ones. We need real justice for victims and their families, not get-out-of-jail-free cards for criminals. We need a leader who understands that protecting the public is more important than keeping prison populations low. What they're doing instead is catch and jail people being mean or racist on Twitter. Really? Those are our priorities now? Here's a breakdown of Starmer's ridiculous priorities.
I think you're right, and I think you share the sentiments of most people in this country. And I think that is why most people in this country feel disenfranchised with the political process and also law and order, because it's misplaced priorities. Of course, thugs, there's going to be consequences with law with that. Even with, you know, grim posts on social media, there needs to be something in terms of consequences. But I agree with your point. There needs to be a prioritization of the scale of the crime.
No wonder all of us feel lost and hopeless. Is Starmer that leader? Clearly not. But the British public isn't going to stand by and let this continue. The early release of the murderers responsible for the death of a disabled man is a wake-up call, one that we can only hope the public takes to heart when they head to the polls.
This is shaping up to be the most unpopular government ever, and potentially the last Labour government in history. The problem is, once they leave power, will there be a country left to rebuild?
Will there be a country left to rebuild after Starmer is done with it? His soft-on-crime policies aren't just failing, they're putting the British public in danger. His decision to release dangerous criminals early, his inability to lead effectively, and his consistent prioritisation of criminals over victims make him unfit to run the country. As long as Starmer is in charge, we can expect more of the same: more early releases, more dangerous criminals on the streets, and more innocent people paying the price for his incompetence. Britain deserves better, and the sooner we realise that, the safer we'll all be. And if you're tired of seeing this kind of injustice, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because let's face it, someone's got to keep shining a light on this madness.